When Jesus positioned himself in the middle of a vast congregation, surrounded by his just appointed 12 apostles, surrounded by the disciples who had been following him after witnessing his many healings and his teachings, surrounded by a multitude from a neighboring country, and pronounced blessing on the poor, the hungry, the weeping, and the excluded, and woe to the rich, the full, the laughing, and the honored. Jesus upended the conventional wisdom about who is favored and who is disfavored by God. He laid out a vision where the fortunes of the people were reversed. In God's reign, those who were down were now up, and those who had been up and enjoying everything would be down. And I suspect that after Jesus pronounced that blessing, quite a few people didn't appreciate the message. I'm sure some of the rich gathered up their things and said, I don't want to hear this. And we can imagine the resistance from some in the crowd, and even those on the receiving end of the good news. It probably didn't make sense, because I'm sure they said, but I'm poor, and I see no change in my material condition, Jesus. After all, the world, the system, it has always been organized this way, such that the rich are the favored ones, and the poor are the ones who consider to be lacking in honor. And yet, Jesus announced a new reality in the midst of an old understanding and opened up a new way for people to relate to one another. But I love how even Jesus probably suspected there were some who were trying to get out of the crowd. And so Jesus said, if you will listen, if you want to hear what I have to say, after all I just told you, if you still want to hear what I have to say, now is the time to listen. And so Jesus now moves into the portion of his teaching, not about what the conditions are, but what we must do to make that vision a reality. If they wanted to live a faith that reflects the reality of the reign of God that Jesus just described, Jesus was now offering concrete ways to take on a kingdom-shaped life. If the upending of the status quo unnerved you, Jesus was now about to tell them how you can get your nerves settled. You see, Jesus wants them to not just hear about the revolution of values in the status quo. Jesus wants them, all of those people gathered there, Jesus wants them to make that revolution happen through what they do to other folk. And as so often it is with Jesus, can trick you. It is simple. It is not easy. And if we distill it down to its essence, it is a simple command. And if you can just keep these 4 in your mind, you'll be okay for the rest of the day. And probably for the rest of your life. It's simple. It's not easy. Love. Bless. Pray. Give. I could sit down now. Love. Bless, pray, give. Don't just love, bless, pray, and give to those who love, pray, and bless and give to you. Now, this is when this is where the hard part comes in. You were with me when I just said love, bless, pray, and give. But don't just love, bless, pray, and give to the people you've been hanging out with all your life. Don't let's love, bless, pray, and give to the people who come to church with you, who are in your denomination. But love, bless, pray, and give to the ones who hate you and who mistreat you. And if Jesus had paused or left room for questions, I actually cringe when I think about all the possible excuses and scenarios people can come up with not to do that. But wait, Jesus. What if it's a Roman centurion? Should I bless him? Oh, wait, gee. What about the guy that just kicked me? Hey, what if it's the person who just ramshackled my house to get the taxes that I owe? It's simple, it's not easy. And even now, some of you are wondering if it could be as simple as loving, blessing, praying, and giving. But Jesus says to those who are listening, love your enemies. Here's the thing too, it's not some sentimental feeling or just reciprocating for those who love you back. Love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Bless the folk who will never bless you back. Pray for folk who mistreat you. Give to anyone who asks of you. Give. Without expectation or requirement that people will love, bless, pray, and give to you in return. None of this makes sense because in the culture that they live in the marketplaces that they trade, life is about transaction and reciprocity. How often do we make Jesus about transaction and reciprocity? I'll do this if you do that. Oh, Jesus didn't say any of that. Just love, bless, pray, and give. No transaction, no marketplace, no making it look like, no making it, fixing it up. Sorry. It's clear, it's unwavering. No limits, no loopholes, no qualifications. Love, bless, pray, give. Be merciful because God has been merciful. And then, just in case they were still wondering about the transaction of it all, Jesus talked about how forgiving and how loving God is, such that we cannot even measure it, cannot even begin to measure God's mercy and grace. When I was a kid growing up, I used to watch Schoolhouse Rock, and I loved it. I loved it more than the cartoons that came on after it. And if you don't know, Schoolhouse Rock was this series of animated short educational films in the 1970s and 80s that taught children about grammar and science and history and math and civics. And one of my favorites was Verbs. It had a funky beat. And it just kept going. I loved it. I wanted to sing it. I would act like I was in the background singing with them. And the lyric says, I get my thing in action. Verb. That's what's happening. I put my heart in action. Verb. You're what's happening. And I was not going to tell you that, but when I kept reading Jesus' teachings to the crowd, one cannot help but notice that it is the verbs that stand out. They are active and they call for action. And so if anybody was confused about how the reign of God can be a reality, Jesus is now talking in active ways, active verbs. Jesus is using active things. Jesus is not inviting people to a passive faith. Jesus is not inviting people to be merely accepting of the status quo. Jesus does not assume that faith is simply a private, individual act of piety. The way Jesus talks about it, it is about putting our hearts into action. Put our hearts into action. Love, bless, pray, give. That's what's happening. They're verbs. Dance with Jesus. And love, bless, pray, and give. What would it look like if we did it? And as those who've encountered Jesus, I know because I hear it all the time, those who have encountered Jesus, who have seen God revealed in Jesus, we know that putting our hearts into action is involved in trying to live faithfully in the reign of God. How do we know that? Because we do it here. We put it into action. Every time we throw open these doors, that's our hearts in action, making a safe space for people to come and worship just as they are. Every time they fire up that stove and bring out that food on Thursdays, that means that we are putting our hearts into action. It's not about how well we prayed last night. Doesn't matter how much piety we demonstrate today. We put our hearts in action. We love, bless, pray, and give. We know what kind of beloved community can be built if we do that. If we love, bless, pray, and give generously and selflessly and indiscriminately. We know how affirming it can be when we show mercy and forgiveness to those who did not experience it in the churches of their youth. We know how it feels to finally realize how much God actually does love us, and knowing how much God forgives us, that gives us a new lease on life. Now, if you're having trouble, having trouble with the idea of putting our hearts into action, of simply loving, blessing, praying, giving to those who have mistreated us, those who have wronged us, those who look at us, those who hate us, I just leave us with the question, how would it look? What if God behaved toward us the way people have behaved toward us, or the way we behave toward others? What if God withheld God's love, blessing, and forgiveness and generosity to us? You know, I've met quite a few religious folk who do believe that God withholds love, blessing, forgiveness, and generosity to LGBTQ people. They believe that God withholds God's love and forgiveness from people of other faith. They actually believe that God withholds God's love and forgiveness through atheists. They believe this. And there are religious folks who believe that God can't or won't love people because of this thing, or because of who they are, or because of what they've done. I know they do. And they use that belief to justify their own refusal to love, bless, pray, and forgive. But notice that Jesus did not give anyone a loophole, did not give us any excuses, did not. Love those who hate you, love those who mistreat you, pray for those who abuse you. And so, when the simple acts of loving, blessing, praying, and giving to those who have wronged us seems too hard to manage, I hope we hearken back to those moments when we remember just how much God loves us. I hope that we are shaken by that spark of familiarity that comes from the revelation of God in Jesus Christ that lets us know that we are forgiven. Those moments when you said, wow, I am really, really connected to God and these people around me. I hope that we remember that we are loved and forgiven, and that it will prompt us to love and forgive in return. I was reminded of that in a profound and startling way just maybe 2 days ago, after it was revealed that the Chicago Police Department was charging the actor Jussie Smollett with staging a racist and homophobic attack against himself. Several friends and I spent just almost 24 hours nursing our anger and disappointment at what he'd done. And we were texting back and forth, insults and harsh words, and you know how snarky gay men can be. We were texting back and forth. Harsh words of judgment against the actor, unable and unwilling to separate Smollett's humanity from the grotesque behavior he's alleged to have committed. And out of nowhere, another friend shared a video clip from the spiritual teacher and inspirational speaker, Iyanla Vanzant. And she out of nowhere just began to talk about love and forgiveness in a powerful way. When a reporter asked her thoughts about the case, she reminded him, and she reminded me as I was listening, that Jussie Smollett is one of us. And then she said something that made me think about all of the things that I've been through. She said, he has an unheard, unspoken, unacknowledged pain. And people in pain make mistakes. And I remembered the ways I behaved when I was in pain, when I couldn't acknowledge it. And then another friend pointing out that something that Bishop Yvette Flunder wrote on the same case. She wrote it on Facebook and told me to go look at it. And she said she wanted to remind us, we who have been thrown away should be very careful about throwing other people away. Oh, they were convicting me left and right. They were hitting me left and right, hitting me left and right. And then I noticed something about both those women, Van Zandt and Flunder. They did not qualify their statements. They did not limit the reach of their love and forgiveness because of someone who had failed. And then Jesus' words kept echoing back. Love, bless, pray, and give to the very ones that don't give it back, to the very ones that hurt you, to the very ones that hate you. And then I went back to something that I think the first biblical lesson I learned, probably at the age of 3, that Jesus said so profoundly, which also steals away any limitation and qualifications you want to put on it. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Amen.